Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Samantha Ann and I talk about books. So today I'm going to be going through my November wrap up. November was actually a really good month for me, surprisingly enough. I had planned on doing more vlog style wrap up this month like I did for the month of October. I will link that video up above. However, just with the way that my work schedule fell, I ended up having to work a lot of overnights and my work schedule was wonky and it got darker earlier. That's why I didn't really do vlog style this month. But like I said, it was actually a really good month for me, and that is surprising. So for the month of November, I read a total of 13 books. I am not going to talk about all those books in this wrap up because 5 of them were actually for nonfiction November, and I plan on doing those in a separate video. So 13 books. Of those 13 books, I'm going to talk about star ratings: 0 1 stars, 2 2 stars, 3 3 stars, oh my god, 4 4 stars, and 4 5-star reviews. So then when we break down format, there were 3 physical copies, 4 ebooks, and 5 audiobooks. Sorry if I keep looking down, I just have my little sticky down there that has all of my information on it because I couldn't remember everything. So let's just dive right on into some books. So the first one is in ebook format. It is Love Poems by Pablo Neruda. And I have only read a couple poetry collections this year, and I just wasn't super impressed by any of these. Like, there were a couple that I liked, but I just wasn't impressed. And it's funny because I had heard from so many people that this is, you know, well, maybe not this particular collection, but, you know, this is a poet that you need to read and blah, blah, blah. So I gave it 2 stars. I didn't really connect with it in any way. You know, they were love poems, and I don't know. It just wasn't for me. It just wasn't. I'm sorry. So it just wasn't. Okay. So the next book that I read was The Girl from Everywhere. And I gave this one 3 stars. It definitely wasn't bad, but it wasn't my favorite book that I've read this year. The story is a time travel story. You have our main character, Nyx, and they time travel via maps on this ship. And so the concept seemed really neat. The execution was a little lacking. The pacing in some places I felt was a little off. Though I did really like the writing and I like the way that the characters were written. Bonus points because there is a biracial character in this book, main character, and honestly, most of the cast of this book is pretty diverse. It also takes place in Hawaii during the 1800s, I believe. And so the historical part of that was accurate because I believe that the author is also from Hawaii. So that was really interesting. But like I said, the pacing just felt off at times. I felt like it could have been, I mean, it's like a 400-page book, but I felt like there were parts of the story that we didn't really need to get to the end result. So I feel like there were just, you know, parts that could have been taken out. But I mean, it definitely wasn't a bad read. If you were interested in this book, I would definitely still say go ahead and pick it up. I do have the sequel, The Ship Beyond Time, and I definitely do plan on reading that. So the next book that I have is Exit West by Mohsin Hamid. You guys, I really loved this book. I gave this book 5 stars. And it seems like from the reviews that I've read that you either fall into one or 2 schools of thought. You either really love it or you were really disappointed by it. For me, I really, really loved it, for a lot of different reasons. It is a very short book, and I was really astounded at the way that he was able to make me feel about these characters in less than 250 pages. You can see that I did a lot of tabs and a lot of note taking because I loved it. Basic plot of this book is you have your 2 characters, Saeed and Nadia, as their country kind of descends into war, and it is implied that it is a country in the Middle East. It takes place in some version of our universe because they mention places like the United States and Greece and things like that, but they never actually name the country that our main characters are from. And there is an element of magical realism in this that I didn't expect, but I did really enjoy because it was very relevant to the way that the story is. So you're following the relationship of Saeed and Nadia and how their relationship is affected by the war that's happening in their country and by their immigration. I mentioned in the last book that I just talked about that I felt like there were things that were added into this book that just didn't really need to be added in. And that is something that this author does really well, the whole adage less is more, because as I said, it's less than 250 pages, but you get so much feeling from those 250 pages. There are just so many pieces of this book that just single lines that just absolutely like struck my heart in a way that I wasn't expecting. And this was actually nominated for the Man Booker Prize this year. It's one of the only books that I read that was nominated for it, but I can see why. I absolutely loved it. And like I said, there's those two schools of thought, so you might read this and not really like it, because the writing is definitely dry at times, but I felt like that made those pieces that I love so much more impactful, and I think that that's why I enjoyed it so much. So absolutely 5 stars, highly recommend. If you haven't read it, it's super short, you should definitely read it. So the next book that I'm going to talk about is Lincoln and the Bardo, and that is by George Saunders, whatever. I ended up giving this one 4 stars, and I started out reading it in ebook format, and I really wasn't sure how I felt about it because of the way that the story is told. And then I think I posted it on Twitter, and everybody on Twitter who had read it was like, you need to listen to the audio. So I had a couple extra credits. It was very, very different because the audio version has over 160 narrators. And so it took me a minute to kind of like figure out where everyone was and who everyone was. But once you got into it, I really, really enjoyed it. It is historical fiction. It's about Abraham Lincoln's son and Abraham Lincoln himself, and I'm not gonna go any further than that. Honestly, this book is just so incredibly hard to explain because of the format in which it's told and just because of other things about, I mean, I definitely did enjoy it. Like I said, it took me like maybe a quarter of the way through before I was like, okay, I can really get into this. The first quarter, I was like, why does everybody say this book is so good? Like, I'm so confused. But, you know, all in all, I definitely did enjoy it, so I ended up giving it 4 stars. So, and the next book is Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. I don't know how to, God, I'm really bad at names. Ugh. I need to look these things up before I do these videos, but I never remember to. Anyway, I read this one on ebook format, and everybody's like, oh my God, this book is so good. Not everybody. This is another one of those books that it seems like you either really love or you really hate. I didn't really hate it. I was honestly just not impressed by it. It wasn't super impactful on me in the way that it was for other people. And for that reason, if you're on the fence about reading this, I would say go ahead and pick it up because you can read it in 15 minutes. But, you know, for me personally, I just didn't really feel a connection, and I just didn't really connect with it at all. I probably will not be picking up her second book of poetry. I am so disappointed in the poetry that I have read this year. And granted, I have not read very much. Like, let me be very clear about that. I need to go and read some of Bree's poetry recommendations that she's put out there, because apparently the ones that I'm picking I'm just super striking out on. But yeah, I gave it 2 stars. It just wasn't for me, but you know, if you were thinking about it, then I would go ahead and pick it up. The next book that I read was 11/22/63 by Stephen King, and boy, oh boy, was this thing huge. I did this part audio and part print. And this was another time travel book. Apparently, I was just really into time travel this month, but clearly, based on the date and the front cover, this book is about a man who's trying to go back in time to save JFK from assassination. And there's a lot of other things that go along with it in this book. So going into this, I knew that this was kind of a departure from the traditional like horror that is Stephen King. This is time travel, this is a little bit more science fiction. And I am very, very happy to report that I loved this book. So one thing that I have seen that turned a lot of people off on this book was the romance element that was in this, which is something that King does not do a lot of in his work. I loved it. I thought the touch was wonderful. Sadie and George/Jake, I loved their relationship. The way that this book ended, I felt was absolutely perfect. And when I got to the end, I was like, I didn't know I cared so much about these people. Like, I am so upset right now. I had no idea that I cared so much. So I really loved that. There were, at certain points, definitely touches of that traditional horror that we see from King, which it was woven in there very well and it fit where he put it. So I did really enjoy that. One thing that I do wish we had seen a little bit more of, because the whole book is about Lee Harvey Oswald and his assassination attempt on JFK, but I felt like there wasn't a whole lot in here about Oswald. I mean, don't get me wrong, like he was in here, but I don't know. I wish that I could have seen a little bit more of that. But despite that, I still gave this book 5 stars. No, it's not because I'm biased and I love Stephen King, but I really loved this. And I loved the fact that like the feelings that I had about it really snuck up on me. Like I said, I got to the end and I was like, oh my God, you know, like I didn't realize that I felt so strongly about these characters. So I really enjoyed it. If you are not into horror Stephen King, this is definitely a good place. I don't want to say to start because it's so freaking huge, but this is definitely a book that I would recommend to you if you're not into like the traditional horror, because it is really good. You really get to see his writing style, you know, which is excellent. So the next book that I have is another 5-star. I read this one on ebook, and I read it in I think 2 sittings because I loved it so much and I couldn't stop reading it. And that is Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. And I loved this book so much. I thought that I was gonna like it, but I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. So this is a story about Simon, who realizes he's gay, and kind of what his coming out looks like, and his relationships and his friendships and things like that. And he's a high school kid, and so, you know, whatever. I just loved these kids so much. Like, I thought they were the sweetest. And if you didn't know, this book is being made into a movie, and the trailer released the other day, and so like my Twitter feed was nothing but like, oh my God, I love this so much. So I feel like this book is really important for young adults, especially people in the LGBT community. And the reason for that is you don't really see mainstream coming out stories like this. It's like this, you know, high school love story, romantic comedy type deal, you know, that's in the mainstream. And I think that is so important for people to see. I think that's so important for people to see themselves represented like that. And so I'm really excited that the movie is being made. And like I said, I absolutely adored the book. I adored the characters. They felt like real high schoolers to me, which has been one of my complaints about reading young adults sometimes, is that you get these characters that act much older and they speak much older than they actually are. But I really felt like I was reading the words of a 17-year-old, and so I really loved that. Becky did an amazing job. So if you are interested at all in that plot synopsis and you have been holding off on reading it, don't hold off on reading it anymore. It is so good, and I am really excited to see the movie because the trailer, I think, is excellent. So, and the last book that I'm going to talk about is Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman. I listened to this one on audio, and the reason that I picked this one is because in my last book of the month box, I got The Rules of Magic, which is supposed to be a prequel for Practical Magic. I've seen the movie, I love the movie, but I wanted to read the book. So I ended up listening to it, and I gave it 3 stars. It definitely wasn't bad. This was my first book that I've ever read by Alice Hoffman. And obviously, like I said, I had seen the movie, so I pretty much knew the plot. Although they did change, I mean, obviously, like you do with any book to movie adaptation, they did change a lot of things, but I liked it. I liked the way that it was written. One thing that there is not a lot of in this book, there's not a lot of dialogue. It's a lot of Hoffman telling us what is happening versus really showing us what is happening. However, I did like some of the writing. Some of the writing was really magical, and I really loved that. I would venture to say if you haven't read Practical Magic, but you've seen the movie and you wanted to read Rules of Magic, you can probably do that without actually having to read the book, because they are so close together. And again, it's more or less a prequel to Practical Magic. So, but I gave it 3 stars. I mean, it was decent. I don't know that I would read it again, and I don't think that I would actually physically buy the book. Because sometimes I do that. I listen to a book on audio. If I really love it, I'll buy the physical copy. But I don't think that I would do that with this. But I mean, it was decent. So that is all I have for you guys today. So it was a really good reading month. Have you read any of these books? If you have, what did you think about them? comment down below and let me know. Also, while I'm thinking about it, because I don't know how I forgot about this, a couple days ago, I reached 400 subscribers, and I don't really know how that happened because I'm just so shocked that anybody, like even 10 people, would give two shits about what I have to say, which is just amazing. So thank you guys so much for that. As always, if you like what you see and you want to see more, please make sure you click thumbs up, or if you are here and you're not subscribed, you can definitely click the subscribe button. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye.